So I'm going to peel some more wire apart down here and see where some stuff goes, because this rat's nest is really giving me trouble. Okay, I'm working the wiring harness at the switch. This is the switch. What I am figuring out is that this wire that's kind of turned white is actually J2. J2 splices together with this wire here that goes to the windshield wiper. And then on the other side where the splice goes, it's also J2, and it goes all the way back to the fuse box right here. That's this connector. And at the splice also has this red wire that comes around, and it goes, and that must be F14. So it doesn't really do what it's showing here, but it kind of splices at that junction right there. And has a pigtail that comes off of it. But it also runs all the way back to the fuse box. So, don't know why that's going all the way back to the fuse box, but it is. Alright, so that must be supplying power to something on the switch. Okay, the next thing that's on here is this black wire, which is supposed to be a brown wire, must be L7. So this black wire here is L7, and it runs along, and it splices together right here, and then shoots back into this long wire harness and ends up right there. The other side of this splice goes into the fuse box and supplies power, and then coming out of that fuse box is this pink wire that goes into a splice, and it goes into the light switch here, and the other wire splicing out of it is this red wire that comes back and must be this red wire here, which is going into the bottom of that box. Okay, that gets you that. Let's see, coming off this switch also is this pink wire, which for some reason is turned orange. And that pink wire runs, looks like back into this mess. I'm going to have to figure it out. That must be one of these wires here that's running through there is pink. I'll have to dig that apart a little better because of the fading. And that orange wire runs back over here. Looks to me that this orange wire is this wire right here that's all melted together. And it runs over here to this other side of the wiring harness box, or the panel over there, or the connector over there. Okay, what's the next wire that comes out of here? There's this black one that's tied together right there with this other red one. So the black and the red looks to be this J10, and they should both be going to the firewall. So they must come up here and go back over there. There's the black one, And one of these other wires must be a red one, so I'm not sure which one's which. There, I'll have to tear this whole wire apart and see what's melted and what's not, and figure that out. Okay. But anyway, that's the way this runs with a fuse box. It's a little different than what they show in the wiring diagram. Alright. Well, this black one is supposed to be F8, and it's supposed to be coming up to this low oil water pressure here. So is that black one actually this black one? Boy, I'm going to have to peel that apart and figure out where these wires go, because there's too many blacks. Can't tell what goes where. Then there's this whole stringy brown wire that's burnt up. I have to get that figured out too. And then figure out how this fuse box is all wired up too. So I'm going to peel some more wire apart down here and see where some stuff goes, because this rat's nest is really giving me trouble. Okay, so I did get this wire pulled apart, and it does end up coming out over here with this low oil water or oil pressure light. So it kind of runs in through here and then back up to over here. So that's that one. Now I got some more stuff to pull apart, because this one is coming apart really hard. Alright, this other black wire that went over here to the firewall actually runs over here to the fuse box. And it says it's hooked to the alternator, I think. I'm going to have to do some double checking, because in this rat's nest it's all gook in there. So I'm going to have to pull this whole thing apart, I think, to figure out what goes where. Oh, so listen to that. It sounds like it's raining outside. Well, talk to you guys in a bit. Okay, this light blue wire actually goes to the fuel gauge, and that has become deteriorated because of this brown wire that was hooked next to it and kind of melted it the whole way down. So that'll be maybe one that I'm going to have to replace quite a ways until I find a good spot to splice it together. Okay, track these down now. This top wire, right, is A5. This top left is the temperature gauge, so that's T10. This pink wire below T10 is going to the ignition switch, which is J9. The white wire below A5 is actually coming up here to the oil pressure. So that would be O1. Then below O1 is this black wire. This black wire, which is that one, that's running all the way over here to the alternator. Is that... It says alternator on there. Let's see. So that is this top one here. It says alternator regulator. Alternator regulator is one of those. None of them show up as black, so is that this J10 maybe? Hard to say. Then this one coming off of here, this red one that swings back to the ignition switch right there is tied in here. That's going to be J10. So that one there is J10. This brown one here that's all burnt up is L10. And then the blue one right above it is the fuel gauge. And that one is F13. So that's what's coming out of that socket. Now we'll trek it back the rest of the way. So there's that piece. Okay. Alright, next time we'll track it the rest of the way. Okay, so there is no wiring diagram anywhere that shows a fuse box. So my goal is to track down each of these wires, figure out what its label is, what its size is, possibly even what its color is, and figure out where it comes to and where it goes so that I can generate a wiring diagram better than what the book shows. Because the book doesn't have everything in it. But it does have sizes, so and colors. So I'm going to work off of that to try to figure this out. Okay, so what I decided to do was to try to track down every single one of these wires, labeling its beginning and its end point. So say this one is L7, over here is L7. And it ties into this wiring harness and ties into A1, and this wire that doesn't show up anywhere in the wiring diagram, which is A2, which goes down to the fuse box. Then coming out of the fuse box is another wire that's nowhere in the wiring diagram, this A4, that goes into A5, which goes to the light switch. And it also tees off and goes to this one here, which is L13A, which goes up to the brakes. Then the other side of the brake switch is D10. D10 comes all the way back and ends up over here as D10. And somehow this ties into some other switch under, or coupler under to the dash that goes back to the lights. So I'm trying to just track down where all this stuff ends up, because the wiring diagrams in the book are missing so much information, and it isn't even like it was originally, because that junction there is nowhere indicated. So it's more a matter of just tracking down how it really was done versus what they did, and then eventually hopefully I can come back in and clean up that mess. Alright, I'm going to keep working on this. Okay, so I've gone through and labeled every wire all through this under dash wiring harness, except for these two here, which are blinkers, but the other ends of the blinkers are just one end to the other end, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. And the other item is this wire with that end that is tied to the same thing that has power that leads to the instrument cluster lights. I have no idea what this is for. Don't have a clue why that's there. Anybody got any ideas what it's for or why it would be there? Let me know. Well guys, what I'm going to tell you is that the wiring diagram from the service manual isn't even close. So I am going to rework it as I rebuild this to accurately describe this, or at least more accurately describe this wiring harness. Because without the fuse box information and wires that are showing that are going to not the right things in the diagram, it's going to make it really hard for people to figure it out. But I think I got this one figured out about as best as I can. And now next thing I'll do is check each wire, see which ones I have to replace. Definitely that one. What is that? L10 or whatever. This L0. This wire here that isn't even in the wiring diagram. That one's crapped out. The fuel gauge line, that one's wasted. And there's a couple others. This one here, which is the voltage regulator wire, or the alternator regulator wire. That one is pretty melted too. So looks like I got a little bit of work to do once I get going on this. So talk to you guys later.